to the sound. To the sound.
All right, welcome to another review of a video that's talking about atheism. As I talk about atheism, well, actually not quite as I talk about atheism, because this is coming from a theist, but something that I watched I think yesterday, and I was like, oh man, I got to review this. It's kind of bad. To give you a heads up. But anyways, this is from our friend Robert Groen, who I did a debate with on the Non Sequitur Show. If you want to go find that video, it is on the Non Sequitur Show. I should have put it in the video description, but didn't even think about it. My bad. But you know where to find it. The Non Sequitur Show, which I'll be doing probably late tonight as well. Completely different topic. Hopefully I can get another show in tonight. But anyways, this video is... I'm getting error messages. Hopefully you can hear me. I got an error message, but I think it just went away. So let me know if you can hear me and see me just fine. Floyd, thank you very much. I will be in touch with you for that. Yes, I have a preceptor that I was talking today. Arrogant as can be, incompetent probably for the most part, but who wants to come on. Well, I invited on and said they'll run a precept script, but whatever. Hank says for $2, you saw me with Jim Bob. I know how to stop precept. I did watch a little bit of it, Hank. The thing with Jim Bob's thing is he goes on for hours, man. I mean, his thing's like 3 or 4 hours. And I'm not saying that some of my videos don't do that. Of course they do, but very rare anymore. I do try to limit mine to about an hour to 2 hours. I think it's just a lot more easily digestible. Floyd had a debate last night. Oh, I went on. Yeah, talk to me a little bit before I get started on this. I'm having my coffee here, and Robert in his video has coffee, so I thought it was apropos. But what was your debate on? But yeah, I still reviewing Jim Bob's stuff. I just won't go through a 3-4 hour video that he has. If there's clips that somebody wants me to review or timestamps, that would be even better. But all his videos that he has for his atheist series, whatever he's calling it, I don't remember. He had 2 of them already. I did do reviews on those, and generally positive feedback. I know that Jim Bob doesn't think I answered the question, but as far as the philosophical people I've talked to, yeah, I think they were all on board with me. I think a lot of them have the same criticisms. So, is Jesus the Jewish Messiah? Interesting topic. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was just reading about a little bit on El and Yahweh being a kind of a a conflagration of 2 different Canaanite gods, where you had Yahweh as the warrior type god, then you had El as the father of the pantheon. And so the God of Israel is basically this mesh of these gods, on the pantheon put together. So Yahweh is literally a derivation from earlier gods. And, I'm not a historicist, when it comes to history. I mean, I'm a historicist when it comes to Jesus. I believe Jesus existed, but I don't know the myth very well. If you want to learn about the myth, go talk to Derek from Myth Vision. He's probably the foremost leading lay expert on that topic. And I don't know if he's even considering himself lay at this point. He's very well read, but yeah, I think he's probably professional at this point, because he's got a successful channel on that very topic. But what do you think about that, Floyd? Do you think that it is possible that Yahweh isn't, as far as the Israeli or Israel, God of Israel, was this mixture of other Canaanite gods? Yeah, and Floyd says Deuteronomy 32:7-9 states that Yahweh is the son of the Most High God, El Elyon. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was reading about earlier, exactly, that they were related, but Yahweh was the warrior child of El. And so, I think all these gods are myth, obviously. I think that all of them came from the mind of God. But I still hold on to my agnosticism, because I still think that when you're talking about God in the global sense, there's a very, very real possibility that there's some intelligence involved. And I just haven't been able to exclude that completely. Even though the probability is low, it's not sufficiently low enough for me to say I believe that there is no intelligence. I'm still in the middle ground there. But obviously I deny the Christian versions of God and all the Hindu gods and the Zeus gods. And I know people may criticize me for that, but I think that even people in philosophy recognize that my position is extremely well thought out, It is justified. And so when I talk about atheism and agnosticism, I do so from a very precise, um, perspective. Nothing wrong with people that do hold atheism. Nothing wrong with people that hold the agnosticism. Nothing wrong with people who hold the theism, as long as you can justify it. That's it. Yeah, and Floyd says yes because the Israeli were former Canaanites, and I think the same thing. And I'm a Jew. My mom is Jewish, makes me Jewish. So good, we're on the same page. And I slurp. Kim wants to say sound and vision seem okay. Good. All right, let's get started on here. If you guys remember Rob, Rob's trying his hand at apologetics. Nice guy. He is a nice guy when he wants to be. He could be a bit of an a-hole on Twitter, but so can I. Personally, we can get along. But his apologetics are really, really bad. And I've told him straight up, being honest, apologetics is not for him. But, he's going to do what he's going to do. And so I'm going to do what I'm going to do and review his apologetics. Excel shows, I heard the same thing. One was a God of war, the other not war. The God of the Old Testament is actually a composite of the two. I think the New Testament God is more of the composite. It depends on, again, Deuteronomy speaks to them separately. But the Old Testament God seems to be this very strong warring type God. I mean, he's a jealous, vain, almost malevolent type being, so to speak. He's not omnibenevolent by any stretch of imagination, I don't think. And why is my chat all mixed up on my video here? I can't see. It looks like there's 2 copies there. Huh. Let me fix that. No, it's not that one. That's the wrong thing. What is it under? I think I got 2 browsers there. Let me think here. Is it this one? Yeah. Do you guys like this chat box better, or do you like the one that's kind of like you can see more? What do you guys like for the better of the chat? I've asked before and I get different answers. So what do you like? Do you like that one where I get rid of the chat box? Because the chat box has been not working too great lately. So let me get rid of this. Do you like it like this, or do you like the chat box? Let me know what you think. I kind of like this one better, and I think it works better because the chat box, for some reason, doesn't work very well. It just cuts off sometimes. But while you're doing that, let me start this off. All right, so anyways, Robert, I'm going to review your video here and see what you think, because he argues that atheism fails at logic, morality, epistemology, and science. My biggest criticism I can give him in this video is that he didn't use the Oxford comma. I can't deal with that. That's emotionally triggering to me. So, Robert, if you want to fix this, please, for everything holy, put an Oxford comma in, please. I beg of you. Okay, the first one was the chat box. This is the second one. This one you can clearly see more. Okay, the first one is easier to read. All right, well, the thing is it just breaks all the time, I think. Let me try it, and if it stops, I'll go back to the other one. It'll start again when there's a new chat. And I can't even get it to work on my other channels. It only works on this channel for some reason. All right. See, now it's not working at all. Oh, there it goes. All right, I'll leave it that one. It's going to start over again. So we'll see if it works. It got stuck the other day. All right. What you got for us, Rob? Dazzle us with your apologetics.
Good day to you, friends.
Good day.
Rob with you again.
All right. Cool. So you just drink coffee.
Coffee. Life's simple pleasures.
It really is. Nectar of the gods, man. The only thing that gets me functioning. Not the chat box. I'm looking for a new non-peated single malt. Any recommendations? I just prefer Johnny Walker Black, which is a single malt. But that's my favorite, is just Johnny Walker Black. Not the chat box. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the other one. Hank wins. He's super chatting, so he gets the other one. Now I gotta find the other one. Browser source, I think that one. I gotta turn off the chat box now. Chat box. There we go. All right. Thanks, Hank. Not the chat box. All right. But anyways, drink coffee. Let's go.
tried to take a break from atheism, but
You failed on
apparently it's
that.
just
Yeah.
not working out for me. So this video I'm going to just break down 4 reasons why
Four.
atheism just doesn't work
All
at
right,
all.
cool. Let's do this.
So, just to give a preface for this video, remember a number of years ago, it was a beautiful sunny day, summer sunny day, and I really tried. I mean,
You
I
really
really
tried.
tried. I tried to concede if atheism was possible, and
Again, I've already watched this, but I think most of you can realize that this is going to a look at the trees argument. Yeah, it really is.
it was a beautiful sunny summer day, and that didn't help the atheistic cause in my mind at all. I remember looking around, just thinking, is it possible?
Is it possible?
Is it possible for atheism to be true? And I
Yes.
remember looking around on this beautiful summer day, and I'm like, it's just not possible.
Yeah. This is a huge problem because this is literally a look at the trees type argument. Hey, look at the trees, oh God, right? To say something is not possible, Robert, you need an actual structured formal argument that shows there's a contradiction involved. This is called a proof by impossibility, or a reductio ad absurdum, something along those lines. Your incredulity is not an argument against something. Now, you can have epistemic incredulity. Don't get me wrong. You can say, look, this is so far-fetched, I don't believe it. But that's a different statement than saying something is impossible. I can say, look, Noah's Ark is so far-fetched that I just epistemically don't believe it. I believe that it is completely false. Is it possible logically? Yes. Is it possible nomologically? No. Is it against the laws of the universe? Yes. But that doesn't make something logically possible. There's a big difference there. When you're talking about impossible, you need to make sure you're talking about which type of impossibilities you're dealing with, because logical impossibilities are much stronger than any kind of other metaphysical impossibility. Just because something is nomologically impossible or ontologically impossible, that doesn't mean it's logically impossible. It is logically possible that this cup could have been blue. It is metaphysically possible this cup could have been blue. In some other world, this cup is blue in some other possible world. But the laws of logic could not have been possibly different in some other possible world, at least generally speaking. I mean, there's some complexities involved in possible world theory, but generally speaking, the law of identity is going to be true in all possible worlds.
It's not possible.
Why?
For all of this to just come on its own.
That's nobody claims that
No
it did.
guided process.
No. Where are people claiming that the universe came on its own and came into existence or started? Nobody's even claiming this. No scientist believes this, right? There are some mysteries involved, but there's a lot of things about life that is mysterious that we just don't understand yet. But as we have seen, we have discovered things in science that we didn't know prior, especially hundreds and thousands of years ago. We have come a long way. The computer itself that you're using, Robert, is something that would have been magic 2,000 years ago. Somebody would have said this would have been impossible. You can communicate with somebody instantaneously somewhere, all around the world. You can send a signal and everybody around the world that wants to listen to it can. That's impossible. That's incredulous. That's the same type of fallacy that's going on right now. Just because he can't understand why somebody would believe there's no God doesn't mean that it's impossible or that is sound argumentation, because there's many people that believe there's no God. And they don't find, in the very least, that it's impossible. They find it more problematic even that there's no God. I find it more problematic that there's no God. And it's not because I looked at the trees or looked at the universe. I looked at all the stuff I can possibly look at. Theism, atheism, agnosticism. Looking at all these different arguments. And the reality is the existence of a God is so fundamentally beyond what we can epistemically ever know that, to me, I don't even like debating whether God exists or not. But it certainly can be the case there is no God. You can't look at the universe and just say, look, this has to be some God. Because then the problem you start running into is, which God did this? Because the Christian God, as described in the Old Testament, has major problems to me.
It's not possible. Okay.
Why?
But then, and I've heard this word, I don't know, a lot of people, well, you just believe the Bible unquestionably. Well, it's just the most moronic, ignorant claim someone could possibly make of me.
Well, so you don't believe it unquestionably, or you don't believe it's infallible, you don't believe it's inerrant? There are people out there that believe the Bible is both inerrant and infallible, which I find to be untenable. We know there's errors in the Bible. We know this. Let me hang on one sec. I'm going to move this a little closer. Sorry about that. Mic started falling down a little bit. Now we know there's errors in the Bible. We know there's attribution errors, things that were attributed to the wrong source. We know that the Bible was written by, several dozens and dozens of people. I think the last estimate was like 60 some of the people maybe that were written for the Bible, guessing. But the Bible still is something that was written down by man. Whether you believe that it was influenced by some kind of Holy Ghost or God, it doesn't mean that it still wasn't man that was writing it down. And so I don't know what your position on it there is, Robert. Then if you don't think the Bible is infallible and inerrant, then you have to agree that the Bible makes some mistakes. If not, you're just giving credence to the Bible as being this book that gives you some kind of guide to morality and epistemology and science, none of which it really does. Excel says, did I miss something? Is he going to justify why God can poof into existence, but the universe in some form can't? No, he doesn't, I don't think, if I remember. But I will say this, he doesn't really have to in some way. And I get a lot of flack from atheists on this, but hear me out. If a theist posits God as a necessary being, then that's self-justifying. It really is. Because if it's a necessary being, then it can't be any other way. Although you can argue, well, why is God need to be posited as a necessary being? That's a fair question. But that's a different question. And there's a subtle nuance there between why does God need to be a necessary being? And why, other than, hey, God is a necessary being, therefore, he has to exist in all possible worlds, because that's a modal argument, right? So just say, once you posit God as a necessary being, then you don't need to come up with an explanation where does God come from. It's actually, nonsensical at that point. So the question for the atheist, if you want to argue with somebody like Rob or a Preceptor, isn't where God came from, or where did God poof into existence from, because they're just going to posit him as a necessary being that must exist. But the question would be, but what makes God, this particular God, especially this particular God, something that's necessary? That's the question to be asked, because they have a hard time, if ever. I don't think I've ever seen Christian justify that answer. Why does it need to be the Christian God? I mean, they'll kind of skirt the issue here and there, and they'll just say, well, that's the only maximally great being and everything like that. But you're just basically saying that this God is so perfect that everything that you throw at him, it's just perfection. Every criticism you have, there's going to be an explanation for whether you know it or not. He has to exist because perfection has to exist. That's like arguing that mathematical Platonism must exist, that a triangle must exist as an actual form in some mathematical Platonist world. It doesn't follow. You can posit one, you can believe that a perfect archetype of a triangle exists, a perfect form, and that everything in our universe is some instantiation of that. So every triangle we have is just an instantiation of this perfect archetype of triangle in the mathematical Platonist realm, which, by the way, I'm okay with. I tend to that as well. Nothing wrong with that. That's just philosophy. It's nothing strange or bizarre. It's really basically just philosophy and how you can use these things to justify mathematics in scientific and physics, especially. How you justify using things that are abstract concepts in a definitive way and practical way for the science. So it makes sense to me to use mathematical Platonism, but then again, you don't have to. But there's no necessity for it. I don't know of any philosopher that says mathematical Platonism must be true. Nominalism must be true. Quasi-realism must be true. I don't know any philosopher that does. If there is, let me know, and in the comment section. But maybe Floyd might. I don't know of any. I think that's a different argument. But for the Christian, though, they're arguing God must be true. He must be a metaphysical necessity. But the problem with that is even Swinburne argues that God is not a metaphysical necessity. He's a narrowly logically contingent being, which gets into some complexities, but it's not a true metaphysical necessity that must be in all possible worlds. You could argue that God must be necessary in all possible worlds where there are possible worlds where there's something to be a part of, like logic, but there could be possible worlds where nothing exists, even the laws of logic, supposedly.
Because people think that I believe in the Bible, I'm going to question it, then, well, yeah, that's just ignorant, because I've questioned the Bible many, many times.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, though, you always question it with a bias. Look, and I went through this myself. I've read the Book of Mormon twice, at least. Wasn't a very interesting book. I'll just tell you right now. If you've never read the Book of Mormon, it's a really boring, dull, dry read. But I did it twice. I mean, I was told back then, yeah, look, you can get closer to God by reading the Bible. And so I legitimately, the first time, reading the Book of Mormon, the first time I read it, I was really like, okay, show me what you got. I was not a Mormon at the time. I read it the second time as a Mormon to see if I got anything more out of it, right? But I was still, reading with that bias of I want to believe this is true. I want to get something out of it, right? I wasn't objectively reading it as, okay, if I knew nothing about this topic, what would I read from this book? And because if you know nothing about the Bible and you read the Bible, it's pretty awful in some places. Just like the Book of Mormon. If you know nothing about Mormonism, you read the Book of Mormon, you're probably going to go, yeah, this is kind of odd, right? Same thing with the Quran. I mean, I watched some clip the other day with Aaron Ra talking about the Quran being just a bunch of absolute gibberish, so to speak. I don't know what he used, but that's basically what it was, nonsense or something. And I've never read the Quran fully, but the parts I have read, yeah, I just absolutely think the Quran is not of any holy origin whatsoever. There's a Uranta book, if you guys remember that, way back when, the Book of Uranta. That was talking about the celestial spheres and almost these angelic type beings from another world or dimension. Dianetics in Scientology, right? If you remember that. All these books were supposedly giving people some knowledge about something, even though they were just the writings of man. So.
Yeah, when I was in my early 30s, so when I was in university, I really did question the Bible a lot. So this is talking 2011. So
I'm okay. I'm okay.
atheism was possible, and it was a beautiful sunny summer day. And when I was in university, I really did question the Bible a lot. So this is talking.
Sorry about that. I was saying that I was like I don't want to watch Viva La Dirt League. The video went out for some reason. I had to go find it again. So yeah, I just fixed the mute problem. But I mean, it was like it went to my YouTube channel that I was watching Viva La Dirt League, and I was like, don't judge me, man. That NPC man is amazing. Viva La Dirt League is probably it's what YouTube was created for. Okay, so don't judge me. Here we go.
2011. So yeah, about 13 years ago, I put the Bible to the test because. Yeah, I was raised in a Christian home, and yeah, I believed the Bible to be true. But I needed to know the Bible to be true. I had to know that the Jesus I read in Scripture would really be coherent with reality and life. And the thing is, though, by that time I already had committed my life to Christ.
Yeah, so you already had the bias.
No, but I had a bit of a crisis of faith in 2013.
I never had a crisis of faith. I just stopped believing. I never really even had faith, so to speak. I just kind of attributed certain things that had happened and came up with a conclusion that the church was true, but it never really stuck with me that hard. And then once I started getting older, I was like, yeah, there's some problems here.
2011, I had a crisis of faith about a lot of things in my life. I'm not going into personal detail, but
Don't need to.
but suffice to say, it just a lot of things in my life kind of fell apart in 2011. I'm not going to get into all the details.
You don't have to.
Just know that that's true. That a lot of things in my life.
I don't even
fell
like
apart
his
in
video.
2011.
There you go. I liked his video. I'm going to speed this up a little bit.
It was a
Slow
very difficult
talker.
person to be with him in 2011. Thankfully, he was not in a relationship at that time, and if I was, it wouldn't have lasted.
It's 1.5 speed. Let me know it's okay. He has long pauses.
But yeah, so the first point is the epistemological argument. Now, epistemology is just a big word that means how do you know what you know is true?
Let me put it back down since I got back to long pauses. Yeah, epistemology is a study of knowledge, right? But I mean, there's parts of epistemology. How do you know what you know? That goes more into what's called particularism and methodism. If you start with what you know, or you start with how you know. If you start with how you know, it's particularism. You start with what you know, and you work your way back. It's methodism, if I remember correctly. But that's part of epistemology. And so epistemology is basically how do we know something, but also deals with beliefs as well. Epistemology, because knowledge is a subset of belief, when you start talking about dostastic states, what you believe, that is also a part of epistemology. That is also part of knowledge, because you cannot have knowledge without belief in most theories of knowledge. Almost all of them start with the position that you have to have belief first. Not all of them. There's some, I think Tarski's semantic theory, I don't think you have to. And maybe some pragmatist type approaches. But as far as justified true belief plus direct causal theory of knowledge, all those require knowledge to be a subset of belief. So when you talk about epistemology, it really does incorporate beliefs as well. And it is, what we know, how we know, why we know. And this is how you can say that you know something, by using a specific theory of knowledge.
Foundation. I've used this analogy, and I'm writing about it in my book. My book is supposed to be published in.
How does he get to write a book? I want to write a book.
Sometime mid to late March. That's my target date.
Somebody help me write a book.
March, so.
Someone take my blogs and write a book at it. I need a book off of it. I need a ghostwriter.
About a month's time, so that's exciting.
Oh, Floyd. Yeah, I'm going to get to that. Floyd points out something very poignant that I will get addressed in here, because that's the point I was going to make, something along those lines. He says, I don't get that these people think that the universe must have a cause, therefore Jesus walked on water. Exactly. And I will get to that. It comes up here in a few here.
And so, for example, if I were to build a house, obviously the only way that you and I or anyone can build a house is from the ground up. It's the only way to build a house. Now, so of course we have to start with what? The foundation. So,
yeah, I'm clear with that.
So,
foundation.
for example, I'm a contractor, hypothetically speaking, and I start cutting corners. I use cheap material. Maybe I build the house at a slant.
That's why they have safety regs.
Proper levels.
Building codes.
And then as the house is okay for maybe a number of years, but eventually the house starts to crack, deteriorate. Maybe the basement gets flooded.
Yeah, just remember, a lot of houses are not meant to be built for eternity. Okay, keep that in mind. When you're building a house, you have to factor in cost, material, labor, and longevity. And most houses don't last more than maybe 50 to 100 years before they start breaking down. I mean, you're not going to have a house, last 500 years without significant deterioration. And so, no matter how you start your foundation, it's going to deteriorate. It's going to.
Because the house is built on a slant, and eventually the house starts to crumble, and there starts to be a whole bunch of structural problems. Maybe the house even
it doesn't matter what foundation you use, that's going to happen.
Tip over, implode, or have a whole bunch of other issues because the foundation was off. Now, the same is true and equally applicable for your life. If the foundation for your spiritual life, your emotional life, your psychological life, your physical life, if all those things are off.
Yeah, but again, no matter what foundation you pick, you're going to have false beliefs. You're going to do things that can be contrary to that belief system. There's no such thing as a perfect Christian out there, none. And so these types of arguments remind me of just motivational type arguments. They remind me of something that a Christian version of what that guy? What was that motivational speaker years ago? I'm too lazy to look him up. Robbins. Last name is Robbins. If you guys can help me out. Tony Robbins. That was his name. I'm not Googling. it might be something along those lines. It's like, it's just, again, this is not convincing to an atheist. If he's going to do apologetics and he just wants to like keep the believer believing, that's still not, this is like entry level stuff that people first want to get into apologetics. Like, yes, we have a house and the foundation. It's been done before. There's nothing new there. It's already been addressed and discussed why these are not good arguments. And what is it supposed to do? Keep the believer believing or convert the atheist? Because it's not going to do really either. The believer is going to believe anyways. This is not going to help them at all. And the atheist is going to be like, yeah, this is really a bad argument.
So a matter of time before your life starts to deteriorate and crumble and implode from the ground up. So, and the reason that you can know that epistemologically atheism doesn't work is why? Because you can't prove atheism is true.
Oh God, I got a headache already. I've only watched this through once, and the second time I think it's even worse that it hit me. You cannot prove atheism true. Who cares? Logical positivism was a movement back in the early 20th century, and it probably died out around 1930s with the Vienna Circle. And basically, the logical positivists believe that nothing should really be held as knowledge unless it could be proven or demonstrated through verificationism, which later became self-refuting because how do you verify the verification principle? But logical positivism is not the norm for epistemology nowadays. We don't prove things to believe them. We don't prove things to have knowledge. Most of our beliefs are not proven, nor are they provable. But they are justifiable for the most part, many of them, not all of them, and they are warrantable. We have reasons to believe what we believe and then justify it through some kind of system of reasonable argumentation and logic, which most people do kind of in their head, right? Most people don't do formal logic in their head unless you're, Malpass or something. But that doesn't matter that we can prove atheism is true or not. It's absolutely irrelevant to justifying the belief that there is no God. I believe there's a life out there somewhere in the universe other than ours. I can't prove that. I can't even demonstrate it. And when I use proof, I do mean logical proof. But I can't prove that mathematically, logically. I can just say probabilistically, it's more likely, but given the conditions that exist on Earth, have to probably exist somewhere else. And if conditions like ours exist somewhere else and the, trillions of planets are out there, it just seems to make sense that life exists similar because we know from experience that life can exist under certain conditions because of chemistry. We know this because we're living proof of this. It's already been demonstrated. So if it can happen on our planet, it can happen on any planet. So I think it'd be arrogant to say that life doesn't exist on other planets. Life finds a way. The level of intelligence, who knows? I still think there's intelligent life out there and it'd be completely different than us, but they still have to obey the laws of the universe, and things they find out about the universe would be very similar to us, but they may not have the same type of biology as far as like, dactyl, hands and figures and things of that nature. So the way they might do something may be completely different, but the laws that they go by are exactly the same. They'd still understand electromagnetic radiation. They might formulate it using a different type of system, but they would understand that light is a perturbation in the electromagnetic wave if they're advanced enough, which of course I think they would obviously have to be at some point. So I can't prove that though. I can't demonstrate that, but I can certainly justify it. So this argumentation that atheism is not proven or provable, it goes back to like shock of God level nonsense. This is like so bad I can't even tell you. And by the way, shock of God won't come on because I won't in writing answer his stupid questions about, demonstrate that atheism is true and valid kind of thing. I'm like, no, come on my show. I'll talk about it with Floyd FP and some other people that want to join, but he's a coward and he won't do it. So, this is a bad argument just because you can't prove something. Who cares?
Because it's an unprovable claim. You can never prove there is no God.
Yeah, you can't prove theism either. So what?
No one can. So the epistemological claim, the moral claim, and the logical claim all kind of interconnect.
No, they don't.
Because it doesn't work logically because it doesn't work epistemologically.
Why doesn't it work logically? You still have not demonstrated that it's impossible to have no God of the universe. You've not demonstrated this through a logical proof. In this case, that doesn't require logical plausible to be true, it requires that you are saying something is impossible, which is a Leac claim. It's a modal claim that you can literally, if true, prove, hypothetically, because you can't prove all truths, granted. But it's something that possibly you could prove using modal logic. I can prove there is no possibility of a square circle existing. I could prove this, right? Because there's a metaphysical impossibility. I can prove that P and not P cannot be true at the same time. Why? Because it's a logical impossibility. These things are provable. But you have not demonstrated that logic is not possible. You just have this literally an argument from incredulity. That's exactly what this is an argument from incredulity, which is a fallacy.
Logically.
And why is it impossible? And why is it epistemically or epistemologically impossible as well? That's self-refuting because, well, I shouldn't say self-refuting. It's demonstrably wrong because there are people out there that do believe there are no God. And he'll later on say, well, they're wrong. They actually believe there's no God, which is the height of dishonesty. When you start telling people what they believe or know and they're honestly telling you their position, if they're rational agents and they're not trolling or not pose, you are being dishonest. No matter what you think, you are being dishonest. I would never tell a theist that sincerely believes there's no God that they're actually an atheist that believes there's no God. How would that make me look? Look at somebody like, for example, like Dr. Seigart, right? Brilliant man, believes God exists very, very strongly, and I have the utmost respect for him. I would never tell him, you don't honestly believe there's no God, because I know that would be wrong. I would never tell him, you honestly believe you honestly believe there's no God, and you're just lying in your unrighteousness or whatever. And saying that there's a God, that'd be a dick move. And so if it's wrong for me to tell somebody like Dr. Seigart that he knows there's no God, then why would it be any different for Rob to tell an atheist, there's a God? It's the same thing. There's a special pleading there if he's going to say that, all atheists know there's a God, which, by the way, the Bible doesn't say anything about that. And if it did, who cares? But somebody will say, well, God printed it on his heart and stuff like that. These are metaphors, okay? The heart isn't where the thinking goes on, right? But I find it to be so disingenuous when you start arguing things like all atheists know there's a God. So you would have to show that it's epistemologically impossible to hold a belief that there is no God. And so far, nobody that I've ever seen, and I've been doing this a very long time, has ever been able to do that.
It doesn't work morally because it doesn't work logically or epistemologically either. Because you can't trust it as a foundation, you can't trust it for morality or
Why not?
logic.
And you shouldn't. You shouldn't trust it for morality. Atheism has nothing to do with morality. The atheist is not claiming they have a moral structure based upon their belief that there is no God. The only thing that they're doing in that particular case is implying that their morality is not based upon any kind of deity, and they don't hold to ethical subjectivism in the form of divine command theory. Because I still think divine command theory is almost always ethical subjectivism. I have heard arguments and read some arguments about ethical objectivism version of divine command theory. It's not that convincing, but I do know that it exists. Okay, but the atheist excludes that. The atheist, by their position, excludes divine command theory clearly, because it would be an epistemic contradiction to say there is no God, but my morality comes from divine command theory, which is the belief that your actions of obedience to God is what's the moral right action. It's not the fact that God says this is the case, God that says that this is the moral act. That's not what divine command theory is. Divine command theory is that you are obeying God's word, therefore you are doing the right moral act. But the atheist doesn't need that. There are other moral theories out there that you can appeal to. You can't just hand wave them away and say, oh, you can't appeal to these. Why not? If the atheist wants to appeal to moral subjectivism, that's fine, but that's a meta-ethical theory. I still think moral objectivism makes more sense, and I hold to that, but I definitely think that moral subjectivism exists. I think they're both something that's true. I don't find moral subjectivism to be mutually exclusive, depending on how you use them. I know that some people think so, but no. I mean, moral objectivists, in the sense that the moral objectivist says that at least one moral proposition is true, and the moral subjectivist says no moral proposition is true, yes, they are mutually exclusive. But do you accept that objective morality is that that there's at least one moral fact that's true that's not contingent upon external minds or bias or anything like that, but other ones, there are positions that do, then that's different. And again, these words are so changed over the years of what they mean and how many people have used them differently that you really have to suss out what somebody means by objectivity and moral subjectivity. And every debate that I've ever had with moderation of these things, I start off, define what you mean by these words. And I hate using that, like define these things, that people know I hate descriptive definitions being used prescriptively. But because the literature uses these terms so differently, you really got to show somebody what you're meaning by it. And so when I say moral objectivism, it is the position there's at least one moral fact that exists that's not contingent upon anybody's beliefs, but other positions can. Make sense? You guys good? But you can still appeal to normative ethical theories like moral pluralism. You can appeal to consequentialism, which, you know, I generally don't, but I mean, there are reasons to. Utilitarianism, which I don't really think works at all. Rule utilitarianism, act utilitarianism, and then virtue ethics, which I prefer. So these are what the atheist has as options if there's no God, or they don't believe in God. They don't need God for those. You can't just say they don't work. You can't just throw them away. That's so dishonest. Especially virtue epistemology, which deals with the moral act being based upon someone's character, rather than deontological or some kind of deontic thing to duty. And so I think Robert is just throwing away thousands of years of epistemology here just by saying you have to have God to have morality. No, of course not. Now, even the hardcore Christians out there say, look, the atheist doesn't have to believe in God for morality to exist, but the Christian God has to exist to have morality. The atheist doesn't know this. The atheist is unaware of this. Okay, whatever. I'm not going to get into that, but at least that's not inconsistent with the Christian view. I think it's a little intellectually dishonest, but it's not inconsistent if I had to do an internal critique, right? What is, inconsistent is saying that to have morality, you must have God, when the atheist clearly doesn't believe in God and yet has morality. You can't have that. It doesn't work. Unless they want to go full throttle, maybe like, Calvinism, and say, oh no, total depravity. All atheists have total depravity. They're all sinners. They all have no morality. They can't have morality until they believe in God. But that's even worse, I think.
Because the reason you can't trust it for logic is because because you can't trust it for epistemology.
Well, how are those even related? I can do logic without having to appeal to epistemology or having to appeal to God. Is P therefore not P not valid? Does it stop being valid if somebody believes there's no God? Does somebody have to have knowledge of God for P not to be valid? It's clearly a valid argument. It's circular, sure, but I mean it's still valid. Why do I have to have any kind of understanding of a deity? If I didn't have any knowledge of God whatsoever, which I believe that I believe that nobody has knowledge of God, but let's say even belief of God. If I never was exposed to any God claim, right? Would not my logic be working? Would it still not be valid for a valid argument? Is there anything different that the atheist or agnostic or any non-believer using logic would be different if they never, ever, ever heard of God? Of course not. Of course not. And so logic is not contingent upon any kind of belief in God. He'll probably argue, well, logic couldn't exist without God, but that's just a statement. That's just a claim that he hasn't demonstrated at all. I want to see the logical entailment of why you need God to have, logic. And I've seen those types of arguments, but of course there's always issues with him. He doesn't even present one, though. He doesn't present anything of that. The best argument you might be able to get, and I still think it fails, but showing that there's necessary beings that must exist and that the universe is contingent upon one of those necessary beings. That is a solid type line of argumentation. I don't think it gets you where you want to go in like an argument from contingency, but at least it's getting there. This is why I find the argument from contingency to at least be one of the more reasonable arguments, because it does make sense to have, in that particular case, a metaphysically necessary being if you subscribe to the principle of sufficient reason, which I don't, because I think that Oppie's right. I'll the weak principle of sufficient reason collapses into the strong. But given the conditions for the argument of contingency, okay, yeah, you might be right modally that there might be a necessary being. Again, I don't think it proves it, but I still think it has a probabilistic argument. So what? That does nowhere near get you to any kind of Christian God. Not even remotely close. Yeah, I think this is where I was going to talk about getting into Jesus. But hang on.
And the reason you can't trust it logically is because if the thoughts in your brain are just the result of an unguided process, so the neurochemicals firing in your brain are just the product of an unguided process.
Okay. Hang on. Woo. Okay, so let me talk about two things first. Actually, I probably have three. One, Mass Life. Yeah. He says, hey, I see what you're saying and would like to one day have a conversation about this subject, as I very much am a believer of God myself. Would you ever like to do this? Absolutely. Yes, I love these discussions. And I'm having two types of discussions. I'm having discussions with normal, rational people that believe, and then I'm having the dumpster fires. The precept that I have coming on, this guy is a piece of work. It's a dumpster fire, and I will be treating them differently. Mass Life says, I studied past history of revolutions and humanistic ideas, as well as common thought structures of atheism, and would consider myself a novice, but feel confident discussing this. Absolutely, yeah. Let's. You got a way to get a hold of me? Just find me on Twitter, message me, leave a comment, or that one will do it. Just message me. My email's known. Just send me. Well, I'm not even answering my emails. I'm ignoring my emails for the most part, so don't do that. Twitter's the best way to find me. Steve McRae _. Everybody should have Twitter by now. Or find me on Facebook. But yeah, let's set it up. You have a way to get a hold of me, Mask? Maybe we can get Floyd FP on too. I like the panel discussions when we had those types of things. The one-on-ones are interesting, but I do like involving other people, get more of a mix. So let me know. Okay, so going back to Robert here. Okay, so again, as Floyd had pointed out earlier in the live chat, there's nothing so far that could ever get somebody to conclude Jesus. And the simple way of looking at that is this. Oh, thank you, Autistic Shell. Autistic's going to find my Twitter. My challenge to Rob and any other theist out there, we'll call it the A Holy Pope of Agnosticism challenge, or just Steve McRae challenge, but whatever. Show me an argument where you can conclude Jesus is the Son of God that resurrected from the dead, all these things, without using the Bible. If you never saw the Bible and you just looked out, like he said at the beginning, and looked at the trees, looked at the sunset, looked at a nice day out there, you might be able to rationalize in your head that this came from some kind of intelligence. I will grant you that, how you can at least think that. Right? But tell me how you could ever get to the conclusion that intelligence became a soul body that was either the God himself or Son of God that died on the cross and was resurrected 3 days later. And that belief in him will just somehow solidify your position in heaven for eternity. Show me how you get that objectively without using the Bible. Can you do that? I mean, he's a God believer. Could you do something like that? I'd be thrilled to listen to something like that. Because I don't think I've ever heard anybody do that. I don't think I've ever listened to anybody, to the best of my knowledge, ever say, okay, let's start at the basis, blank slate, base level, tabula rasa. What is the meaning of the universe? What is the foundations of the universe? And even then, if you get to God, that's not foundational. There are some problems with this. But how do I even get to that realization that Jesus is the Son of God foundationally if the Bible wasn't around? Or any holy book. Any holy book. Get rid of the Bible, get rid of the Quran, get rid of any of them. Just, I woke up one day, my mind's a blank slate. I start with my axioms. And my axioms are my properly basic beliefs in a weak form of foundationalism. And that one of them I have to start with is reality is real. Right? I can't justify it. It's non-justifiable. but that's the foundation for all other beliefs that are inferential from there. Because the belief that reality is real is not something that can be dosastically inferred. It just can't be. It can't be. It has to be assumed. It's a precept. And no, having precepts does not make you a presuppositionist. Sure. Mass Lau said, can you repeat the question? Can somebody make an argument that can say how you can objectively get to Jesus as the Son of God that walked on water, turned water into wine, died on the cross, rose from the dead 3 days later without the Bible or any other written account? How does somebody wake up one day, start from the basics, start from the axioms that you get to that conclusion? I really am curious. This is not a gotcha at all, really. It is, how would somebody going about doing that? I would be fascinated to hear something like that. And then he starts getting into determinism here. So let me play a little bit more one more part. Then I think I will explain to him why I think he has a misunderstanding of determinism.
Then you have no reason whatsoever to trust your thoughts to be, ironically, logical. And because you can't trust your thoughts to be logical,
why not?
Everything is determined. You can't. There's no such thing as morality in an unguided process, because morality, for morality to exist, you have to have the lawgiver.
No. Okay. God, this video is tough. It's such a headache. There's so many things wrong because, one, you don't need a lawgiver to have natural laws. Natural laws are descriptive. They're not prescriptive. The laws that are codified in penal codes and the legal system, those are prescriptive, that if you violate these are what's going to happen in society. These are the consequences that will happen. A natural law, like, force equals mass times acceleration, Newton's second law, that is something we described. We recognize that here's a force, and if we want to find out what the force is, we can take the mass, we can times it by the acceleration, get the summations, and say, okay, this is how much force is applied in order to move that object or stop that object's trajectory. These are descriptive. You don't need a lawgiver for that because they're not legalese. They're not legal laws. And to conflate legal laws with natural laws is a huge category, in my opinion. Huge. And even then, we don't even know if these laws can be violated. But even in legalese, those laws can be violated. If I say it's against the law to do something, you still have the ability to do it. You still can violate that. We don't know if natural laws can be violated. We assume that they can't because this would lead to massive problems. If the speed of light can be violated, it leads to massive issues. It literally leads to time travel. If you can go faster than the speed of light, it by necessity, nomologically, will always include time travel, going backwards in time. Every single case. You cannot get away from that. And so I do think that the speed of light is the highest thing that any mass can go, because it would lead to paradoxes. It would lead to time travel. And I think that the universe is, whatever reason, it's set up inherently because of whatever reason. I don't know the reason. Doesn't play a god. It just, the universe prevents time travel. The Hawking called it the what do you call it? Stephen Hawking called it the what do he call that organization? The time organization that prevents time travel. He had a name for it. I can't remember it. But basically the rule was that whatever you do to violate time travel, violate natural law, something's going to prevent you. Something's going to prevent you. And so that's my belief. It doesn't mean that my belief's true. It doesn't mean that I could be completely hosed in it. But right now, I believe that we can't time travel. We can't go faster than the speed of light because it seems like everything we try to do prevents time travel. Right? But that doesn't mean there's a lawgiver.
Because laws come from a lawgiver. So for morality to be absolute,
see the category errors
standard
there?
for morality can't be what? Human. Because if morality were dictated for morality to be absolute, there would have to be a lawgiver that isn't human. Because if morality to be absolute, it can't be human. Because if we were just human, so if your morality and my morality are contrary, then
well, people do have different moralities. I assure you. As much flack as I get, I will stand by my principles, and I know that I've been moral. I mean, I'm not saying that I have not done some immoral stuff in my life, sure, but I live my life under the precept that there are people that harm and there's people that help, and I want to be people that help rather than people that harm. And the people that harm go after those people that want to help, to character assassinate them. People in my audience have seen this firsthand, not just with me, with themselves. Right? So we do have different morality senses because I have read stuff on morality to suss out my own moral framework. And I think that people defer to God don't understand how to suss out their own moral framework. I think it hobbles them because all they're doing is deferring to some being that says, oh, well, this God says this, therefore if I do this, it's moral. That's not building a rational moral framework. That's deferring your morality, your sense of morality, to some other being, which basically is your own morality that you're transferring to what you're pretending to be some moral being, because you don't have any access to that actual being to know what is moral or not. You just are reading into something as thinking that you're getting it right. That's the problem. All right, I'll look on Twitter later. Thanks, Life. But that's the problem. You are interpreting what you believed is moral from some other agent that has intentional states according to you. And I find that to be so not moral. I think that morality would be, look, I have my moral things, and if they align with this God, great. If they don't, well, let's find out why. Because in the Old Testament, even the God has done some pretty highly questionable things. I'm sorry, but suppose if you flood the earth, that's pretty questionable. Sending strong delusions, pretty questionable. And why did God send, I think it was the Thessalonians, why did God send strong delusions when, in theory, if he's all powerful, he could literally change my mind to believe anything? Or maybe he's prohibited to. Maybe he's not all powerful in that regard. Maybe he doesn't have the ability to change somebody's mind because he gave him free will. And there'd be some kind of universal contradiction there. And God can't do that kind of stuff. Who knows, right? But everything that we know about God is stipulated anyways. We don't go out and discover God. We go, okay, we read this. This person says this about God, and that person says this about God, and we come to our own beliefs about them, about that. What we're being told.
And there's no morality but humanity. Morality is just arbitrary, meaningless, and pointless.
It's not arbitrary, and it's not pointless. That's why the existentialists want to say, look, we're giving our life purpose. We give reasons for our existence, and we make something out of it. There's nothing wrong with that. The person who says that life would be meaningless without God scares me, because if they found out God didn't exist, would they all of a sudden end themselves or something? Would they stop wanting to be alive? I don't get that. I don't understand that at all. If your purpose for life is contingent upon there being a God exists, then what the heck are you living for? And I don't understand why would you even, what would you even think if you found out that God did not exist? If you actually could know that, if you were learned that there was no God, would that change how you live your life? I mean, clearly it would change the fact that you're apologist, Robert, but would it change your moral code? Because I knew people that said they would. They would be out doing evil atrocities and moral evils. And I'm thinking God that may or may not exist, that there is, the belief that there's God, because these people are sociopaths. If anybody says, look, if there's no God, then I can do whatever I want, you're a sociopath. You're not somebody who should be functional in society. Exceller Wright for $2 says, just throwing money on the stage. Hey, appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. Become a member of the channel. You get a cool green name and you show support. So if you like the content that I'm doing as far as these atheist videos and you want to learn more about atheism, become a member of the channel. That really helps me the most. It's a couple bucks, $2, $3, $5, whatever. I don't have big numbers. People join channels for $20. And I'm like, hey, I think my highest is 10 though. I think I'm not mistaken. But yeah, become a member of the channel. So that's how you can support me, because I will be doing these videos. So I will be promoting my memberships. So just self-promotion there. Let me go in a little bit more, because there's something I want to point out with determinism that I think he gets into, unless I already missed it.
But so that's why for epistemology, morality, and logic to be absolute and true, there has to be God.
Why? That doesn't even follow that there has to be a God to have moral absolutes. A moral absolute can be something that is just always wrong, regardless of whether God exists or not. That's something, when it's absolute, it doesn't require a God. Just like a metaphysical necessity doesn't require a God because it's a metaphysical necessity. The law of identity for all of x equals x is itself a logical necessity. It can't be contingent upon God. God could not have created the laws of the laws of logic in that aspect, because the laws of logic are either necessary or they're contingent. If they're contingent upon God existing, they're not necessary. Pick a lane. But moral absolutes would not be contingent upon anything. That's what makes them absolute. I'm not a moral absolutist. I don't know very many people are nowadays. I don't think I know any moral absolutist. And maybe some Christians in some ways, but there's different degrees in that spectrum too. You have moral absolutism, and then on the opposite side you have moral relativism, and in the middle more of what's called moral universalism, which I do kind of tend to a little bit. I think there are certain moral things that are always immoral. Okay, no big deal. But the moral relativist says, historically in this particular culture, slavery was moral. God commanded people how to have their slaves, therefore it was moral. That's historical relativism or cultural relativism. It's a little bit cultural too, but cultural relativism would be, this other country, they think that showing ankles is immoral, when over here in America we don't find that to be immoral. That's cultural relativism. And some people argue, well, yeah, it's immoral if you're over there. It's not immoral if you're over here, though. But I don't follow that relativism, because I think that it's neither immoral here nor there. So I don't subscribe to that type of cultural relativism. But I think that moral absolutism is a very difficult moral position to justify. If there's any moral absolutists out there, let me know. And that's not the same as moral objectivism. Not the same. One's a metaethical theory. The other's a moral normative theory, although there is overlap.
And the reason it doesn't work, what was the fourth point? So logic, yeah. Oh yeah, scientifically.
Science.
So it doesn't work. So obviously atheism doesn't work scientifically, because,
why?
Simply put, you can't get everything from nothing.
I know you guys just cringed out there. I know you guys did. Let me repeat this for people that have never looked at any of this stuff. Science is prohibited from addressing any claims about God due to what is called methodological naturalism, or as Gould tried to define it as non-overlapping magisteria, that science has its own thing that it does, religion and theology has its own thing that it does, and they shouldn't overlap, and I agree with that. To say that atheism is not is not scientifically possible, that there's a category error there. They're unrelated. Now, you can say, hey, look, this person is claiming this is a miracle. You can go look at it, find a naturalistic cause. Yes, you can do that. Science can do that. What science can't do is conclude a supernatural cause. If God ever came down and revealed himself, then science would have to change to come up with some kind of different philosophy of science. Because at that point, if we can conclude that there is a God, and everybody knows on the planet now knows there's a God, hypothetically, right? Let's assume that. God could, in theory, change the laws of the universe anytime he wants. He could mess with your experiment. Even if he told you he wouldn't, you have to assume that he's going to keep his word, because you're assuming he's omnibenevolent. You're assuming that he's a just God. These are still assumptions. You have no way to prove that. You're believing him at his word. How do you epistemically prove that God will keep his word? You cannot do it. You have to assume, based upon things that have been told you about this deity, that he won't violate your experiment. But God could be a trickster God. You have no way of knowing otherwise. He could be what's called dystheistic, which is somewhat malevolent, not all good. You don't know. We're humans. We don't have the ability to have epistemic certainty like that. We just can't. Now, could God be an all-powerful beam you epistemic certainty? I don't even know. I think it's biologically not possible. I mean, unless he's really messing with your brain where you actually believe you're certain. Okay, sure. I'll grant that. If he wants to mess with your brain and all this other stuff, and just you actually believe that because of the brain chemistry that you are absolutely certain that God's not going to violate your experiment, that's fine. But that doesn't have any veridicality to if God's going to actually violate it or not. Right? Because your belief is not going to be a certainty that it actually is the case. Does everybody understand that? Your belief does not make it certain that God is not going to mess with you or your experiment.
intelligence requires intelligence.
No, it doesn't. Intelligence can be arose through natural processes.
Life comes from life. Intelligence comes from intelligence.
Life comes from life, then it violates Christianity because Christianity believes that God created life from non-life. And we're not talking about God as a living being. We're talking about biological life. God is not a biological life form as described by theism. So even in theism, at some point, God created man out of something, whether it was called ex materia, something that existed, that some had some form that God made matter out of, or if it was actually material like clay or mud or rib or dust or whatever your flavor is for creationism. Life was non-existent at one point. Billions of years ago, life did not exist on the planet Earth. And at some point in time, did not even exist in the universe. You can say with pretty well certainty that due to the initial inflation period of the Big Bang, there couldn't have been life. There's nothing to make life out of. I think that's a pretty good conclusion. Again, we shouldn't even be talking about certainties, just basically probabilistically that life cannot exist in such conditions, at least not life as we would ever know it. But life that we know it biologically came at some point from non-life. It just did. I mean, whether God did it or didn't do it, it's still at one point non-life existed. And then we have life now. Did I miss the part about determinism? Because I wanted to touch on that.
Everything comes from something.
I know he said something about it,
someone.
but I thought he gets back into it.
Now, the reason that we know there has to be at least one uncaused first cause is because what? Infinite regress is what? Scientifically impossible.
Can I get a citation on that? I'm sorry, but where in science it is said that infinite regress is impossible? I have never seen that anywhere. I've never even seen that in philosophy. There's nothing in philosophy, science, or math that says infinite regress is impossible. Nothing. Matter of fact, there are many paradoxes that talk about it. The Grim Reaper paradox, for example, infinite past. I mean, A versus B theory of time. There's nothing in science that says infinite regress is impossible. I don't know where he got this from. Matter of fact, there are only three forms of possibilities when it comes to the argument from contingency: infinite regress, brute fact, contingent, or necessary. And then some people will put forward brute force necessary as a fourth condition or fourth possibility, which is fine. But really, when you break it down, I think it's just infinite regress, brute fact, contingent, necessary. What else you got? And so, in the argument from contingency, it never says the infinite regress is impossible. What it says is infinite regress doesn't satisfy the principle of sufficient reason, PSR. And so if you start with the argument that you have to satisfy PSR, infinite regress can be excluded because it doesn't satisfy the condition for PSR. I get that. And that's perfectly fine. That's a reasonable argument, believe it or not. But I don't understand why anybody thinks that infinite regression is somehow epistemically, logically, scientifically, nomenologically, any of that impossible. Nobody's ever demonstrated that. Nobody that I've ever seen. And to say that something can't come from nothing, we have no idea what nothing is. We don't even know the properties of nothing. It is a trope to say that something can't come from nothing, or from nothing, nothing comes. These are just tropes. They have no reality in philosophy. Because the philosopher says, hey, look, if nothing exists, we would have to explain what the properties of this nothing is without getting into reification fallacy, which is, the treating something as nothing, or treating nothing as something would be very complicated because you want to avoid that reification. You don't want to treat that nothing as something. But if there is nothing, we have no idea what the properties would be, even if it has properties, or what it would mean to have actuality versus potentiality. We don't know if something can come from nothing because we don't know if it has potentiality or an actuality or nothing. We don't even know because you're just saying, look, if there's nothing, then you wouldn't even have nothing, right? It's just so beyond our ability to understand because of biological limitations. But in philosophy, yeah, I've never read that something can't come from nothing as a logical argument. Never. It's frowned upon. Probably it's something that would tax our mind. But that's when philosophy would interject and say, look, maybe nothing is impossible. But we don't know. Maybe it might be a universe that our universe is necessary in some way. That reality is necessary in some way. There are philosophers that believe that. Right. And that gets around that problem. But they I don't think they'll ever say, look, we believe that necessary is impossible, but if necessary, if nothing is possible, then we have to admit we don't even know anything about it, whether something can come from it or not. Did he talk about the determinism yet? I think he does coming up a little bit more.
And logically absurd.
Because I want to make a point on that.
So
when he said something.
eventually we're going to have to come across non-cause, first cause.
No, you don't.
We call this being God.
No, well, first of all, it could be quantum fluctuations, right? And a lot of people keep going back to why is it quantum fluctuations? The reason being is, one, there's a paper out there that shows the universe can mathematically be created from a quantum fluctuation. And the other thing is that I don't know if Rob's ever looked into physics or anything, but in quantum field theory, which is something that I'm not that familiar with, I did have, training in physics and thermodynamics and physics, but we never at all really got into quantum stuff. But you learn things as you go over 30 years. But in quantum field theory, from what I understand, you have these fields that exist. You have the electron field, you have the Higgs field, you have the electromagnetic field, you've got all these fields that interact with each other at a quantum level. So the electromagnetic field a perturbation in it will cause a photon. And that doesn't interact with like the electron field, which is for fermions or leptons. Yeah, I guess both. The energy level, for example, like an electron, 0.511 electron volts. It can only exist at that perturbation level. It's quantized. And so when you have an excitation in that field, you have a particle. But it's still a wave. It's a wave looking like a particle as you observe it when you measure it. And that wave function collapses. We know these fields exist ubiquitously out the universe. And I think it's more than just mathematics. I think these fields do actually have ontology. I think they do actually exist. Why? Because we can see the effects of them. Gravitational waves, we can see the effects of them. We can put a magnet with iron fillings on it. We can see the lines of flux. There's something there. These fields do somehow exist ontologically. They're not just mathematical descriptions, I don't think. And that would be a form of scientific realism in that case. But how these fields got there, who knows? That's a $1 million question, right? Did God make these fields or some kind of intelligence? But even if he did, why? Why did he make the universe the way it is? Because 100 years ago, we had no idea about quantum. We had no idea that these fields existed. We didn't even understand the atom until the early 20th century, when Rutherford and Bohr and other great scientists said, "Hey, look, we want to know the fundamental components of reality." Yes, people have argued for centuries or thousands of years. Democritus, that argued that everything could be subdivided into these fundamental parts. He didn't understand atomic theory, obviously, but he realized just by intuition, we can keep getting smaller. But then the physicist comes along and says, "Oh, hey, look, the smallest indivisible particle is the atom." Well, we found out that wasn't true, obviously, because we developed nuclear weapons and nuclear power. So we know we can split the atom. Well, protons then, neutrons, they're indivisible. Well, no, we know now that they're comprised of quarks. Well, quarks are indivisible. Well, we don't know that because it could have string theory. Same thing with electron. We have no idea if these are indivisible particles or not. We assume, but we don't even know if there's more fundamentals with string theory and excitations of fields. But we do know now that these particles that we think are physical matter are just condensed energy. E equals mc squared literally is energy equals mass times speed of light squared for rest mass, non-relativistic, because then you have to factor in the momentum and position. But E equals mc squared is telling somebody that mass and energy are the same thing. They're just a relationship between them. All energy is condensed matter. And I know it's off topic from philosophy here, but I really think it's important that Robert looked into this stuff, because we can explain reality at least by fundamental theorems like quantum field theory. Now, doesn't explain why there's something there? No, but that's the great mystery. And he's going to just assume there's some kind of God behind it. But we've already established that we didn't need God to get to the level to discover the atom. We didn't need God to get to this level to discover that atom is comprised of things. We didn't need a God to understand that the gluonic structure between the quarks that produce the secondary strong nuclear field, or strong nuclear force, is what keeps the binding energy for the neutrons and protons together. Because in that nucleus of the atom, you have these protons which are the same charge, they electromagnetically repulse each other. But it's held together because the strong nuclear force from inside the protons and neutrons is what keeps that ball of hadrons together. That's why we call it baryonic matter, because there's something holding that together. And then when you split that, you're overcoming that force, and then that's releasing energy. Because there's actually a mass defect involved. If you add the individual masses of the protons and neutrons together, you're going to get a specific number. And then when you can put them in a nucleus, that number's lower. It loses mass. Now, if you did this with the macro level, like basketballs, if I had 5 basketballs and I measured their weight or their mass, I'd get a number. And when I put them together, it's the same number. That doesn't work on the nuclear level. It doesn't work. Mass and energy are interchangeable in that regard. And I think it's very important that maybe Robert look into that. And you may not think that it relates to philosophy, but it absolutely does. Because we're looking at what is ground level reality. And what we're discovering is that there is at least some grounding in reality due to these forces, these fields. And a field is a force. I mean, yeah. But I mean, these fields that seem to actually exist in the universe. And they are quantized. And if anything, I hate to say it, I'm probably going to, my whole audience is probably going to like unsub at this point when I tell them this, but I don't believe in simulation theory. Let me make that clear. I think Nick Bromson's argument is decent for what it is, but it doesn't get you where it's going. So I'm not a simulation theorist, okay? But I would argue that what we know about base level reality and the coarseness and fine granularity and discreteness of quantum, it does lend more to a computer simulation than it does to his version of a Christian God. So... but I don't believe in either. But the fact that we understand quantum now that we didn't do, 100 years ago, 200 years ago is just, I think people are very, very fortunate to be able to know things about science that they didn't know hundreds of years ago. And I think quantum is one of the most amazing and most confirmed theories out there. It's just, I mean, I always say that evolution is the most confirmed theory. But really, if I really had to be objective, quantum is the most, quantum is the most confirmed because it's mathematically confirmed, right? So I don't know. It's a toss-up. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that quantum mechanics is more confirmed or evolutionary? Now, again, not putting quantum with general relativity. That's not. Quantum field theory and general relativity don't play well with each other. We do know this. But do you think that quantum mechanics, that we definitely know that particles can interact, we know they can entangle, we know that they have decohesion, decoherence. We know these things. Mathematically, they've been demonstrated. So which do you think is more confirmed? Or maybe they're equally confirmed. I'm going to go with equally confirmed. Skeptic says, do you subscribe to T-Jim's moral field theory? That there's a field of imposition out there, Skeptic, and so when a rock falls on your head, it's an involuntary imposition of will. Therefore, the act of the rock is immoral because it's gone through that moral field. Am I close to T-Jump's moral field theory? Is that close to it?
Now, that's just a simple analysis. Of course, I get much more into detail about the morality part, especially in terms of slavery and supposed genocide of God.
Yeah, it's immoral. I'm sorry, but God creating everything and then killing it off, I think that is immoral. I think that he had a moral duty to keep intelligent people alive, to keep moral agents alive, and not just kill them because he wanted to. Same reason why, as pet owners, when we no longer want the pet, we don't have the right to end that pet's life. We only do when it's sick or elderly. I think that's fine. I get that, but we don't have the right as stewardships to animals to cause unnecessary harm. I think that's the moral thing to do. And again, people are going to like, well, you're not a vegan. Well, no, I mean, I eat meat, but I do believe that when you kill an animal, it should be humane.
Which is outlined and described in the page of Scripture, more specifically in Genesis, in the Old Testament. So Genesis and Exodus deal with slavery more than any other.
Yeah, literally God's telling you, hey, look, I'm not going to tell you slavery is wrong, but if you had decided to have slaves, this is how you should do it. You know, you should keep them for 7 years. If they want to leave, take their kids, take their wife. If they want to stay, drive a nail through their ear. I mean, does this sound like something that an omnipotent being would have for codification of slavery? No, it literally sounds like what somebody who wants slaves would say in order to keep their slaves. It really does. Skip says, no, I think it's more along the lines of humans discovering objective morality as time goes by. No, I don't think that's T-Jub's moral theory. T-Jub's moral theory is the involuntary imposition of will. I've listened to it enough. That's his moral theory.
Books of the Old Testament. But I get into that more so in other more other videos in
what is he? So I thought he talked about brain fizz here in determinism. I know he mentioned it once, but
I've done a lot of talks about atheism. So remember, atheism doesn't work scientifically because you can't get everything for nothing.
Yeah, it works scientifically, and atheism has no stance on nothing. Let me make this very clear, because this is, I'm going to put this in my series, Learning About Atheism. I already did. I already put it in the playlist. Atheism has nothing to do with nothing, something, causation, nothing. It atheism is the thesis that there is no gods or God. I go globally, so I just say there's no God for atheism. That's what atheism is in philosophy. That's standard. If you're a lack belief atheist, believe what you want. I don't care. You're not going to be taken seriously by people that are in philosophy, pretty much. But atheism as the theory, the belief, the thesis, the doctrine, the dogma, the creed, the claim, whatever, all those are fine. That there is no God has nothing to do with the creation of the universe, has nothing to do with nothing, something. It absolutely doesn't. Now, is there relationships to those beliefs? You can make an argument for that. You can say, look, the atheist says there's no God, so how does the atheist justify the existence of the universe? That's perfectly fair. Perfectly fair. But that's a completely different argument.
It doesn't work epistemologically because it's unprovable.
Okay. Do you hear what he said? He just said that atheism is epistemologically impossible because it's not provable. You can't prove there's a God either. That make theism, Christianity, epistemologically bad? No, I don't think any Christian out there can say, look, here's Jesus. I can't demonstrate to you. I can't even make a logical proof that Jesus is the Son of God. So by his own standard, that's epistemologically impossible as he's using it. Hi, Chris. So for him, see, already he just, everything he's argued so far is just so wrong. It's just so wrong. This is what I'm saying. He needs to stop doing apologetics. Seriously, stop doing apologetics. Preach the gospel. Become a gospel preacher or something. Preach the gospel, but don't do apologetics. Rob, I'm telling you, you're not good at it.
Work logically because there's no such thing as logic in a predetermined, unguided process.
Wait. Let's go back to this real quick.
Atheism doesn't work scientifically because you can't get everything from nothing. It doesn't work epistemologically because it's unprovable. It doesn't work.
Again, who cares? It's provable or not. That has nothing to do with epistemology.
Work logically because there's no such thing as logic.
There's no such thing as logic?
In a predetermined, unguided process.
In a predetermined, unguided process.
And it can't be moral.
All right, we forget it. Before getting the moral, I think this is where I wanted to bring this in. Okay. When I first listened to this, I think, that I thought that, Robert had a very fundamental misunderstanding of determinism. A deterministic process only means that there's a causal chain. Let me repeat that. Determinism only means there's a causal chain. There's causality there. There's something was a causal mechanism that made something be the case. That's it. That's the thesis of determinism. That it doesn't mean that everything is necessary. It doesn't mean fatalism. It doesn't mean that things have to be exactly the way they are. It doesn't mean the universe had to exist in its exact state that it is now. That's not what determinism means. The universe could have been different. Determinism allows for differences in the universe. This universe that we exist in right now could have been different because of uncertainties. Quantum uncertainties, Heisenberg uncertainty principle, right? You cannot know the exact position or momentum of any given particle at the exact same time. Everybody knows that one. There's also time and energy. You cannot know the exact time and energy of a system at the exact same time. That's also Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So because of these uncertainties, the universe could have been completely different. We don't know. We have no way of knowing what universe would have been different if some quantum fluctuation caused these virtual particles or something to be created, but then real particles came out of it on the event horizon of a black hole because of Hawking radiation. But these virtual particles are random. When they're created, they're destroyed so quickly we can't know they're there because it has to be within the smallest amount of Planck time. Within Planck time, we can't observe it. But if the particles created on the event horizon of a black hole, then one particle goes in and the other particle comes out, that other particle happens to become a real particle. Okay, that's how evaporation works. That's how Hawking radiation works. These are all random events. So even in a deterministic universe, the universe would have been different in some regards. So determinism, again, just means that there's some causal relationship there. But unfortunately, there may not be causal relationships because of indeterminacy as far as physics. But the whole thing with free will and all that, that's talking about the ability to decide being independent of influence. So I don't believe in libertarian free will, but I do believe it in the universe not being deterministic in that regard. Because I noticed that Robert and Jim Bob and Andrew Wilson and a lot of them love to argue that atheists believe that universe is just material, just physical, and therefore deterministic. And that doesn't follow. Just because if you do accept materialism or you do accept physicalism, which I don't, and by the way, fields are included in materialism, okay, in philosophy. I know Jim Bob had a hard time understanding that, but fields, quantum fields, are considered to be materialistic, even though they're not comprised of anything. Just because you're not comprised of something doesn't mean that they're not part of materialism. They're not abstractions. Well, I mean, you could argue they're abstractions, but they're abstractions that actually do exist. It gets complicated, okay? But I think that they actually do exist. We just model them abstractly. But deterministic means that, like you said, there's just some causality there. Our brains, being the state that they are deterministic in the fact that they're based upon underlying physiological cause and effect. That's true. But why our minds exist out of that is so complicated, and philosophy of mind, but it doesn't necessitate these deterministic processes that there had to be a mind. They're under the impression that if the atheist believes materialism or physicalism only, then we are just the end result of all these processes. But that doesn't necessarily follow. They could have been different. It could have been different. Chris says, what is this guy on about? He's talking complete BS. No, I don't think he's talking about me. I think Chris is talking about this guy, Robert. Right? Clarify that for my audience, Chris. I'm not talking BS. Yeah, it's a lot of word salad. You're right. It is a lot of word salad.
Because morals would, for something to be moral or immoral, there has to be a lawgiver above humanity.
No, there doesn't. Why does it need to be a lawgiver to have morals? Again, if God ceased to exist, would morality no longer exist? No, we have morals because we are societal beings. We are beings that have learned over billions of years of evolutionary processes that to function in society, we need to have certain rules. Man has learned this very, very early on, before we even had a chance to codify them, before we even had a chance to even understand and process them. Man understood that we need certain things. Matter of fact, even go back as far as single-cell organisms. They knew in their capacity, and maybe I shouldn't use the word no, but single-cell organisms reacted in the presence of danger. They knew, and again, no, they had the ability to work together. It was more beneficial. Bacteria developed what's called quorum sensing, which allowed them to detect predators or food or chemical signal to each other that there is something there. They worked together better as a group. They got along better as a group, so to speak, even though they didn't understand anything about morality. But moral codes go back, the fact that we're moral is because we're societal creatures that go back all the way back to the beginning in biology, I believe. And like I said, even though that the very first cells didn't understand what morality it was, they started that evolutionary process for societal groups.
which of course means God exists. So for morality, science, logic, and epistemology to work, God must exist.
No, there's no entailment there, man. These are just arguments by assertion based upon your belief system. If you want to convince the atheist, nothing so far will do that. Find me one atheist that watches this video and goes, yeah, man, that guy Robert, man, he really knew what he was talking about. I really believe now. No one. And even the hardcore Christian body goes, yeah, this is just your average person just running these scripts that any baby philosopher would run.
No.
Or a baby Christian, sorry.
We haven't gotten to the God of the Bible yet, but just for the sake of argument, God must exist for morality, science, logic,
none of the above.
Epistemology to actually function.
This is a throwaway assertion. It has not been demonstrated in any way, shape, or form. But I think I can demonstrate that you don't need God for any of these things. Why? Because we have moral theories. We have knowledge theories. We have justification theories. Because we have those, I can demonstrate that you don't need a God for these things. That doesn't mean that God doesn't exist, but at least my argument is more rational that I don't need a God to have morality. Why? Because I have moral theories I can appeal to. That the very fact that I have those moral theories to appeal to is evidence that you don't need a God to be moral or to have a moral theory. 7L5 says, notice his Gary Busey hair transition. That's pretty funny, actually. Skeptic say, was the first replicator molecule that jumpstarted evolution? Well, obviously RNA is self-polymerizing. So RNA, we know, can self-replicate. We know it can self-polymerize. And, obviously how the cell started as this rotational thing and how it started getting a membrane and all this other stuff. All those things are very complicated. I'm not a biologist. ATP synthesis, very, very complicated. Way beyond my level. I'm not going to talk about it. Even though I did videos on ATP years ago and the electron transport chain. I talked about that because that actually is one of the complexes, complex 4. But all these things are iterations over a long period of time. But as far as the self-replicator, we know RNA can self-replicate.
You cannot function without God. Your very existence.
Why? That's assertion.
Means God exists.
That's a look at the trees argument. That's you exist there for God. How does it even get you to the Christian God at that point? That's like saying, look, you exist, therefore Vishnu exists. Or just name a creator deity of some kind. You exist because whatever belief I believe in is true. There's no logical or evidential or empirical or irrational or epistemic. There's nothing that has any implication or entailment there. Nothing.
And guess what? You know it.
Oh, this is the worst part.
You know it.
I hate this.
You know God exists.
No, I don't know this. And I'm telling you, Robert, when you tell an atheist they know something that they clearly don't know nor believe, all you're going to do is alienate them because they're going to realize they're dealing with a dishonest interlocutor. That is one of the most dishonest things you can do, is try to have a rational discussion with somebody who honestly is purporting their actual beliefs, to tell them they know something that they don't know. That is so beyond dishonest, and it's going to have absolutely nothing but negative feedback. Because if I told you, Robert, that there's no God, wouldn't you be offended by that? Even if it's true, you're going to be offended by that. Why? Because I don't have the right to tell you know something if I'm going to treat you as an honest interlocutor. If I'm going to assume that Robert believes what he believes, then I have to do so and take so at face value that he actually believes what he believes. Now, do I think his claim to knowledge is off? Yes, but I'm not going to even go into the knowledge claims, just for the belief claims themselves. The Dostastic realm, I call it, the Dostastic domain, which means just beliefs, not knowledge, as I call it. I have to treat you as if you are telling me your beliefs are what they are, that you're not lying to me, that you're not being a Poe. And if I have the courtesy, the respect to say, I believe, even if arguendo, even if for the sake of the argument, I say, I believe that what you are saying, you actually believe, then you have no right to tell that person that they know something to the contrary. And I think that's the biggest takeaway that anybody can get from this video. Don't tell somebody what you think they know if you're treating them as an honest interlocutor, because at that point, they're no longer going to treat you as one.
Just see, it's not that you believe God doesn't exist. It's that you don't like, if you're not a Christian, it's not that you don't, or that you claim to be an atheist. It's not that you really believe there is no God. It's just that you don't like the way he runs the show.
Yeah, so
If we're going to be honest,
stupid.
we got to start with there.
No. I can say that, look, your particular version of God, I think could be a moral monster, right? I mean, somebody who floods the earth, which, because younger creationism is absolutely false, scientifically speaking. That is not up for debate. Scientifically speaking, younger creationism is false. If you want to take it as a faith-based belief, we can discuss it as a faith-based belief. But science has already shown that it didn't happen. This is conclusive. This is confirmed. None of that happened according to science. As a matter of fact, I would say that it's scientifically impossible to have some of the claims about Noah's Ark and the flood because of phylogeny, because of the heat problem. There's so many different reasons why. So it's scientifically impossible. Just like I can say it's scientifically impossible for me to sprout rings and fly. Is it metaphysically possible? Yes. In some other world, I have wings because it's contingent. But we know that science will say that it is impossible for me to sprout rings right now and fly. By that same reasoning, I can say it's scientifically possible that the flood never happened. I can say it's scientifically impossible that all biodiversification came from kinds on the ark. I can say it's scientifically impossible that the earth is not 7,000 years old because of the heat problem. There's no way to get that amount of heat out of physics because it would just liquefy the earth. It would just, the crust would literally liquefy. It's that much energy that they have to account for. So
it's not that you believe that there is no God. It's that you don't like the way God runs the show.
Yeah, well, again, maybe certain versions of God. There's versions of the New Testament God, and be like, okay, that'd be a beneficial God. Maybe that would be all go. I mean, if Jesus was this really cool guy that was, had some great teachings, okay, that's a little bit different, right? That kind of God maybe is a little bit different. But I believe that the God in the Old Testament, the God in the Bible, describe different beings. They don't seem to be the same being. So my personal belief about your God is irrelevant. I don't disbelieve him because I think that flooding the earth is a bad thing to do, or killing babies is a bad thing to do. But that's not the main reasons why I withhold affirmation of the proposition God exists at all. So again, this is attributing a emotion to people. When you're talking about science or you're talking about philosophy, then stick with philosophy and stick with science. Don't attribute these emotional biases that people don't have. Again, it's going to have the entrenchment effect. It's going to have the backfire effect because people aren't going to take you seriously. You're not engaging them seriously. You're not treating them with respect that they actually believe what they believe, and they're just, oh, you don't like the results. Well, no, there are arguments to be had if somebody doesn't like the results of somebody. That's called incredulity. Just like you don't like the results of science, Rob. You don't like the fact that science has concluded creationism, younger creationism, is absolutely wrong. You don't like that. I could probably make that argument because you don't like that. But I wouldn't say it's because you don't like that, therefore you believe in God. I can just say you don't like the conclusion. Well, that's fine. But you can't say I don't like your particular God, therefore I've concluded that God doesn't exist or withheld judgment on God. That doesn't follow. Big difference.
It's simple as that. All right. Peace out, brother.
All right. That's where he ends it. All right, guys. And that's where I'm going to end it as well. It's been 90 minutes. I want to keep these things under 90 minutes, as I said. Let me know what you think. Yeah, of course I know what last Thursdayism is. But last Thursdayism is a type of Omphalos hypothesis. And sure, with miracles, anything's possible. Okay, granted, whatever. But if last Thursdayism is true, then God would be more of a trickster God. But again, if we live in a simulation theory, it could have started, when I was born. Could have started when you were born. I could be the only person around. You may not exist. Other external minds may not exist. Solipsism could be true. And if solipsism is true, there can be only one. Highlander. If solipsism is true, there could be only one. Think about that. I came up with that years ago, and I was like, yeah, look, if solipsism is true, there can be only one. Highlander is true. But yeah, we have no way of verifying anything about last Thursday, and therefore the Lar Parsimony kicks in, Occam's razor, that it makes no sense to have an axiom that everything was created yesterday, 5 minutes ago, last Thursday. It doesn't get you anywhere. We have to assume that the reality has existed for a very long period of time, because that's what the science and mathematics show, that there is a history there to be had. And we know from experience that we progress into the future. If we progress into the future, it makes sense that we have progressed from the past. And so there's no reason to adopt an axiom of Laxtheism. But it's sure, yeah, that might be true. I think that as more as it's so funny, more I continue, I think that you all probably don't exist. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. I'm not a solipsist. Okay. But anyways, guys, I'm going to end this. I'm going to try to get in a late show tonight on Non Sequitur After Dark. I'm going to try to, and it will be, if I do, it's going to be late tonight, like 9 or 10 o'clock Pacific. Not a lot of audience for it, but that's why I call it After Dark. But it depends how I feel. This takes a lot out of me. My coffee is wearing off, and I'm tired. But I can't sleep in tomorrow, but tomorrow night I'll be available. But let me think here. Yeah, anyways, let me know what you guys thought about this. Let me know if my points make sense to you. Please leave me a comment. The comments are like the greatest thing people can give next to memberships and super chats and super donations, which I'll read out next time if you leave those on the comment. But if you just want to support the channel, leave a comment and subscribe and share these videos. Talk about them. Do reviews. I don't care. But let me know what you think about it, especially Floyd. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I'll pin your comment because your comment will probably be the most productive of the things that you liked, you didn't like. Let me know. Sounds good? And what you agreed with and what you didn't agree with. Maybe you agree with it all. Maybe. Hopefully. But if not, maybe I messed something up. We'll see. Good night. Sleep well. Yep. If you got to go to bed, let me know. Like I said, I haven't decided whether I'll do an After Dark tonight. If I do, please watch it tomorrow because it will be late and I don't expect a live audience of many. All right.